Ubuntu. It's a special word that was taught to me by a mentor in my life named Archbishop Desmond Tutu. We were sitting at dinner one night, and I was looking at him, and I was quite nervous. I had a hard time communicating with him and having conversation. Midway through dinner, he looked at me, and he said, "Why aren't you talking?" And I said, "I'm not really good at small talk. I don't really know how to engage in this conversation with you. You helped to end the apartheid. You never rose a fist. I'm not really sure how to start that conversation." And he reached over and he put his hand on my hand, and he said, "I'm your grandfather. Although I may be black and you are white, we are a part of this human family. Ubuntu means I am who I am because of who we all are together." Let me tell you a little bit about my story. I am a cyclist, first and foremost. I love cycling. All through middle school and adolescence, I had a major issue with depression and anxiety. I used cycling as a way to deal with that depression and anxiety. My dad had a bike shop growing up, and so I was the little girl in the back of the bike shop that was basically trying to get my hands dirty and learn everything I could about cycling. I loved it. I loved cycling. When I got older, into my teenage years, when everyone else was hitting the beach and surfing, I grew up in Daytona, I would want to be on my bike, and I would want to ride for hours and hours and hours because of that rhythmic motion, that cadence that I was able to get in, that energy, the feeling of the air that kind of just tickles your little cheek hairs, you know what I mean? The feeling of my hair moving in the wind, my connection to the world. Loved cycling. As I got older, it became my means of transportation to work. My husband and I took a job move to Connecticut. I was working for an international nonprofit, and I used to travel back and forth 12 miles each way to work. It's a beautiful ride. As you know, New England is a gorgeous place. So where we live, it's the coastline of New England. So, traveled to work. It was a beautiful, beautiful fall day. It was actually 7 years ago this week. As I got halfway home, leaves are falling off the trees, the beautiful smell of the ocean salt air, pumpkins everywhere, colors everywhere. There's a certain change in the air, right, that's going on with fall. And I was embracing it. I was getting ready to go home because I had the chicken on the counter ready. It was defrosting for dinner. I had kissed my husband goodbye. He was a postal worker. He was going off to work. I kissed our lab, Sedona, goodbye. I'll see you in a couple hours. I never made it home. Halfway home, a multi-ton freight truck came down a side road. I had enough moments to look up and think, oh my, and I was getting run over. Front sets and then back sets of tires. The thing that I loved, the thing that connected me to the world around me, had now become something that had literally pulled me apart, literally, from the sternum down past my knees. I questioned, because I didn't lose consciousness. Thankfully, and not thankfully, I had been an EMT years prior. So I began to triage myself. I'm probably going to die, I thought. I knew I needed to scream and yell. I knew if I was screaming and yelling, I was getting blood and oxygen to my heart and to my brain. I was vasodilating. I knew that little bit as an EMT, and I knew that as long as I was vasodilating, I had more of a chance of survival, because if I went unconscious, my chances were much more slim. My paramedics, one of whom is here in the front, showed up in record time. They had me backboarded, taken away. I was screaming and yelling, I want to survive. I want to be a wife. I want to be a mom someday. We were trying to have our firstborn. Human connection. One of the EMTs in the ambulance put her hand on my heart. A beautiful act of psychological first aid. Nothing really can replace it. And she prayed out loud that I would somehow be saved, that I would find some grace. Made it to the hospital. The world started caving in, and I flatlined. 20 minutes of CPR the first time, cardiopulmonary resuscitation. If you haven't been trained, you should. If you break a rib, that's okay, they're dead. Hands over hands, CPR compressions, over 20 minutes the first time. And then I would have multiple cardiac arrests thereafter. Once I was stabilized enough, I would go into surgical intensive care. I would be in a coma for 5.5 weeks, locked in this shell, machines breathing for me. And my human family that I didn't know, all the medical staff, respiratory therapists, everyone coming in, taking care of me 24/7, totally vulnerable. I left there after being able to breathe on my own. I went to a rehab hospital. I started to understand that I had over 78 units of blood. Within the first 48 hours, my femoral artery had been ripped. My pelvis had been snapped in half. Lost a lot of blood. I didn't die because my heart wasn't strong. My heart was strong. I was an athlete. I died because I ran out of blood, that life-saving blood that we all have, that beautiful red blood. I was out. Over 78 units, including platelets and plasma. 20 bags of plasma and over 20 of platelets. So there needs to be 5 people to donate in order to get 1 bag of plasma. That's the sticky stuff. The plasma and the platelets is like the sticky stuff that makes the blood stick. So for trauma patients, their heart can continue beating. So that's like well over 150, maybe 200 people that had to roll up their sleeve, not for the juice box or the animal crackers, right? But to roll up their sleeve and say, I want to be a hero. I want to help humanity. I don't know where my blood's going, but I want to help save someone's life. I am a product of heroes. Going back to Archbishop Desmond Tutu, we all bleed red. White, Asian, Hispanic, black, Muslim, Christian, Hindu, atheist, gay, straight. We are a human family. We are all so vastly different and so vastly connected. Over the next several years, I would have 30 surgeries. I have another surgery coming up in a couple more weeks. I learned through those surgeries that I wanted to make myself as strong as possible, and that in order for me to not get incredibly depressed, because I had already had depression going into this, now what's my identity? I'm certainly not a cyclist anymore. I can't be a mom. My womb was ripped apart. I can't be the wife that I want to be. I can't even be physical with my husband anymore. Everything's been trashed. Who am I? What am I? So we started signing up for races. So even though I had a wheelchair or I had a walker, I could show up. And everyone that shows up at a race has a story. I'm not going to place anymore. I can't place. I'm barely going to finish. But you know what? If I finish, I'm going to get a medal. I need to do something to give back. So I started earning medals to give to my heroes. It's not about me. I'm this vessel of love and light. In order for me to survive and not give in to this incredible depression and anger, which I think I have every right to do so, I want to say thank you, because I'm afforded this gift of life. We are afforded this gift of life. We've now done over 100 races. We have another half marathon this weekend. The medal's I already know who it's going to. I want to share a story with you about this little glass heart that's in my pocket. So as I mentioned, I was an athlete. So I was a cyclist for fun and for therapy, not really knowing it was for therapy as a teenager, just because I loved to do it. And then as I got older, I realized, wow, I'm actually really good at this whole thing. I think I'll get into triathlon, and I was really good at triathlons. I really loved it. I got into running because it was kind of a necessary evil as a triathlete. But after my trauma, after I had been ripped apart and had to learn to sort of walk again, the only thing I wanted to do was run. Because if something's taken away from you, you kind of want it that much more, right? So I had got to a point that I was finally able to drive by myself. I was very terrified, but I wanted to get out and drive. My husband was at work, so I knew that he wouldn't stop me. I got my sneakers on by myself with my physical therapy tools, my little reach-it stick, and got myself dressed, drove myself to the park, and I thought, I'm going to run. I couldn't run. but I was going to do what I thought what was potentially a run. So I got out of the car, and I went maybe a couple hundred yards, well, no, wouldn't have even been a couple hundred yards, maybe 100 yards, maybe from the car. My heart started pounding and beating. I was so afraid of my heartbeat because it triggered me back to death. I remember my heartbeat pounding so hard, and I remember the world going black. I remember being locked in a coma. I don't want to go there again. So I stood in the field, and I cried. And I looked up into the air. I looked up into the heavens, and I said, God, what am I supposed to do? Who am I? I can't be an athlete. I can't hear my heartbeat. I can't feel my heartbeat. I'm so afraid. How do I live if I can't listen to the music of my own heart? And I learned that day that if we ask and we're open, we can receive. That doesn't necessarily mean like a big sign's going to drop out of the sky and say, like, your answer is French fries. However, if we're open, different things manifest. For me that day, this little glass heart was in a field. And I picked it up and I held it in my hand as my heart was pounding and pounding and pounding and pounding. And I was crying, thinking, who am I? What am I supposed to do with my life? I can't even walk away from my car without being afraid I'm going to die. I don't want to die again. And I realized my heart beating was beating the music of hundreds of people. It's not just my heart blood. It's the blood of this human family. I'm part of something so powerful. We are part of something so powerful. Ubuntu, I am who I am because of who we all are together. Wow. So I picked up the little heart, cried, like, probably an ugly cry, walked myself back to the car and held on to it. And I went back the next day and the next day, and I tried to make it work. We cannot control what happens in our life. We can't. We don't know what the next second of this life is going to bring us. None of us do. Two things are certain in this life. Every one of us in this room have been born. Congratulations. Every one of us in this room at some point will have their final breath. It's a fact. How do you choose to live your life? You have an amazing opportunity every day. How do you choose to react to the uncontrollables? Think about that. I consider myself a product of heroes, myself being one of those heroes, because I worked pretty hard too. You all have the opportunity to be a hero to yourself, to your community, to your family, to your world at large, and to focus on the things that you are more alike than different. Whether it's going and donating blood, whether it's volunteering at a shelter, whether it's going and advocating for cycling safety, whether it is spending that precious time that you're not spending being gentle to yourself, and we're all guilty of that. How are you going to make a positive footprint and be that gratitude in motion? What a beautiful gift we are given. Thank you so much.